All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the People We Know show. Tonight is a really special episode. We are going to be talking about the racial tensions in the States and Canada and all over the world. And we specifically want to see what our fellow Black Christians are feeling and how we're reacting to what's going on and what we think we should do about it. And for that, we have three special guests tonight. First of all, and if you'd like to just introduce yourself briefly, is Charlene Downer.
Hi, I attend VCC, lifelong member, mother of three biracial children, and this matter is very important to us. So I'm glad for the chance to discuss and share points of views and to hear what others are saying on the matter. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Charlene. We're also joined by Joseph Enujikin.
Everybody, like Daniel said, I'm Joseph Enujikin. Used to attend Transformation Church for quite a long time. I'm as well the father of three boys. And like Charlene mentioned, yeah, I think it's a very, very important topic to have, especially what's been transpiring these past few weeks. And I'm just glad for the invite for this discussion.
And lastly, but definitely not least, is the godfather of my son, King, Shelly, if you could just give us a brief intro.
Yeah, I'm Shelly. I go to VCC, and I'm glad to be here to, hear what other people have to say and give my opinion on the subject matter. And so I'm excited.
All right, and before we hop into the discussion, the People We Know show cast is all here. So Rich and Val, if you just want to let everyone know what you're doing here tonight, because you won't be here in your regular form.
Sure. First, thanks to everybody for joining us tonight. Val and I are here as part of the team. We're here to listen and learn. We appreciate you all for showing up, and we're just really looking forward to a fruitful and meaningful conversation.
And of course, my brother, Sammy, tell us what you're looking forward to tonight.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, glad to be here. I think this is an important subject that we discuss, exchange ideas, be vocal about what's on our heart. And I think that by doing so, we take the measures to rectify the situation, to put it in action, what we need to do to put us on the path to not having to see this kind of thing happen. And I appreciate all of you being here to have that discussion.
So just to situate everybody, because I'm saying racial tensions, but let's lay it bare. If you've been watching the news at all in the last few weeks, you've heard about the terrible killing of George Floyd by a policeman in Minneapolis, and many other cases, whether it be police brutality or just racially motivated crimes and murder. And us here in Canada, we usually get the kind of moniker that race isn't a problem here and things like that. But I think what our guests can speak to is that's not true. But as Christians, we also feel a different responsibility than just giving ourselves over to anger or rage. So what we really want to know and see what our guests are feeling is, just to start, is how are you feeling about what you're seeing and what you're experiencing?
Well, I'm feeling very conflicted. On one hand, I'm not surprised about how things have come about, because it always felt like it was a pressure cooker situation, that at some point another explosion was going to happen. But then it's always seemed to be that that's how it was going to be. There had to be a big explosion of something major to start off a change. There would be a protest, and then we would go back into a lull. And then nothing would happen again until there was another outcry or another situation. So it was very up and down kind of, with the whole situation. When you're looking at it through the whole timeline, and I want to say like what timeline, but let's go all the way back to like when segregation ended and stuff like that. I'm feeling that this time, however, is very different. This time it feels like there is change that is getting ready to come, and people are at the point where they are ready to listen. And I think that's the most important thing through this whole thing, in my opinion, is that everybody may have something to say, but until you actually stop and listen to exactly what others are saying around you, you can't really focus and then try to come up with a plan of change. So I think now it's completely different, and I'm liking the energy that I'm feeling now in this regards, because since unfortunately George passed away, so many changes have happened within the past 2 weeks. Laws have been repealed in different states in the United States. There's been international protests across the world. Somebody posted on Facebook a list of all the changes that have happened between countries, and a international level, and then within Canada, and then even within the States itself. So I'm just thinking that this time is, I'm more hopeful with this go around now than I was, let's say, maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. But like I said, it's one day I'm feeling very hopeful, which is great, and then other days I'm wondering, how long before we go back to what we were before, even before like COVID, that period. So it really depends on the day and who I'm talking to and what I'm taking in by the media. All the emotions, the rage, the anger, the desperation, the worry for my son, as he's 13, but he does not have the form or physique of a 13-year-old boy. If somebody sees him on the street and not know who he is, I do worry that they will say, this is a grown man and I need to be wary. So yeah, it really depends. I'm really very much, it depends on the winds of the day, and that's where I'm at right now.
Thank you, Charlene. I mean, you touched on so much that I want to get into there, but just the fact that you're feeling hopeful is, for me, inspiring. But the reality is that's not every day, and it wasn't. That really reflects what it was like before all this was going on too. That there are worry for Black parents and Black people. Joe, how have you been feeling?
Well, for me, when I saw the video, I was horrified, like most of the world, but at the same time, I wasn't surprised, because growing up Black, we understand there's an undertone to what's going on here. The police are just extension of society as a whole, right? So any attitude society, or perceived attitudes society holds, it's going to obviously leak into the different institutions that we deal with in society. So even though I never would imagine seeing something like that, I'm not surprised that it did happen, because the way the system's designed just allows individuals like this officer Chauvin to go ahead and abuse his powers. Now, the reaction was quite different. So, like, I recall the Rodney King beating and the protests or the riots that happened there, mostly localized around the LA region. And it was primarily with Black folks down there in the States that were protesting or rioting. The difference that we see here is that it's global. Started off in Minneapolis, all the major cities in the States, all the big cities in Canada started having it, and now it's all around the world. And there's even big protests in the UK and other parts of Europe. So I think that as a society in general, there's an understanding or like a reckoning that there's something wrong, right? Like, I sort of didn't feel it with the other stuff that happened, whether you're talking about Philando Castile, Tamir Rice, all those shootings before, but this particular instance where you had a cop kneeling on someone's neck for like 9 minutes, no one stopping it, I think it touched something in the soul, right? So am I hopeful? Yes, I believe that we are heading the right direction, because if you look at where we were in the 60s, and even before the 60s, where we are now, it's a world of a difference. But, you know, I think that having these sort of tough conversations and like, I don't think it's a one-person problem. It's not a one-group problem. I think it's an everybody problem that we need to discuss, and we need to come up with the solutions to make life safer and fairer and more just for everyone.
Thank you, Joe. Shelley, what about you? How are you feeling?
I'm actually excited to see the progress that has happened. Like Charlene outlined, like so many times things have, like, the response has been riots and da 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 da, but then there's been a lull and everything goes back to normal, and it's like you take it as, okay, that's just another Black killing, whatever. But I like the response that it's actually a global movement and everyone's taking charge and starting to look within their culture and within their system and seeing what the problem is and how they can fix it. I mean, growing up in Canada, like, I know the response now is, oh, there's no systemic racism in Canada, but growing up, I was the one of like 5 Black families in a school. And I remember being at recess, we had indoor recess because it was raining outside, and one fellow Black student did something, and the teacher saw it from a distance, then chose me as to give the punishment to, even though the person said it actually was me, but she's like, oh, you guys all look the same, so, you know, Shelley, you take the punishment. And that was like my first real experience with like, well, you know, what's going on here. And so, like, I'm really actually excited with this, like, things like that is not okay now. There's the whole cancel culture where people are going back to things that you said, 10 years ago or whatever, or things that you're saying right now, and it's not okay, and you're being held accountable for the things that you're doing and saying. So I'm actually excited.
Yeah, honestly, I'm with you guys in your sense of optimism. It does feel like there's something different this time. Definitely, I'm someone that kind of throws myself in to the coverage when these things happen. And when there was Eric Gardner, I think it was about 4 years ago, and the Black Lives Matter movement really started. I remember watching like avidly what was happening and wondering what would come of it. And like you guys said, there was just a lull. But this time, I think it's really different. And I do think that it for it to really change, God has to get involved. And like I personally think one of the things that needs to be the foundation of true change is prayer. So what I'm wondering is, how should we be praying, and maybe what specifically should we be praying for?
Well, in my situation, I believe the same thing. Like, prayer changes things. It's been proven, and it's one of those things that is my go-to for whatever it is I'm getting ready to embark on or what I have to plan out. And I've conditioned, like I've spoken with the children on this topic as well. So it's one of the things that I'm really, I really try to get out there, not even with just my children, but my friends, even in my workplace, that, you know, if you have a problem, start praying. Even up to today, my friend was complaining about a school teacher with her son and how it's not going well. And I'm like, you need to start praying for the teacher that's going to be coming in September. And she's a non-believer, and she was just like, are you kidding? And I'm like, yes, start praying now for September. And, you know, it'll resolve on its own. You watch. And so in this situation, I'm praying for love and understanding. It's easy to talk to somebody that you love about how this whole aspect is coming about and how we're getting ready to open up and hold everybody accountable. But you really need to dig deep and find that love for those who do not like you, who don't want to engage with you. And that's where the love and respect, praying for those things, are going to start. I've had conversations within the past 2 weeks with numbers of people, some that I love, but even with people that don't love me, and I don't like them either. And whatever reason they reached out for me during the situation, when I saw the message, I was like, my first instinct was, you got to be kidding me. I'm not talking to you about this because you're part of the problem. And then I was like, you are the person that I need to be talking to, because this is how things are going to get changed. So then before I engaged with them, I did take the time to say, what is it that I want from the conversation? That's what I prayed for. I prayed for that they just don't hear the words, they feel it. They hear the passion behind it. They hear the intent, and that they continue to ask the questions also. It's good to say, I spoke to a person who's Black about the situation, so I did my part. I'm good. So now I'm going to go on and do what I was doing before. It takes more than that to be able to keep engaging and to actually change. So I've been praying just for the sake that whoever's ready to have those hard conversations, that somebody's willing to be kind enough and respectful enough and in love, have it with them, and then not only just walk away, but come back and after a few days or whatever and say, based on what we were talking about, where are you at now and how you're feeling? Because this is not just a one-time dialogue. I know with this person that I had to talk with, we haven't spoken since our last conversation, but I see on Facebook already that her messages have started changing. I'm sure I'm not the only one she's speaking with, but it's a start. And so in a few days, to reach out to her and say, where are you at now, and what can we do to keep this in dialogue moving, is going to be one of those things. But most definitely praying for understanding, open hearts, and everything in love and respect.
Yeah, I guess the first thing I was praying for was, for George Floyd's family, his daughter particularly, and also there are other people who died as a result of the riots and things like that. I think it's like 4 people now, like 2 police officers and 2 civilians. So one of the things I know that we definitely need to pray for is for unity, in a sense that, we can stand together against, violence. We don't have to resort to violence to get the point across. I understand that there's frustration out there, and this frustration has been building up for years. I also understand there are other people with nefarious intent that are taking advantage of this chaos to go ahead and do whatever they want to do. But I don't think that more people should be dying over this, right? Whether it's, an action from the police or an action from civilians, I don't think anybody should be dying for that. So that's what I'm really praying for. Thank God in Canada, at least, we're not to that point. I lived in the States for quite a few years, in Virginia and in Texas, and they're armed. There's a lot of guns out there. A lot of people own guns. And there are some people who are a little bit less than stable. And I'm starting to see how this thing can pop off in that direction and stuff. So my heart's really for the peace and unity. We can't have a discussion. We can't come to a solution if we're at each other's necks. So that's what I'm praying for.
Yeah, I think it's really important to pray for understanding for those who don't understand the situation, that they, pray that God open up their eyes so they can see. Because if you're not in the position or you're not experiencing these things, it's hard to really know what people are going through, and so you just are oblivious and think it doesn't exist. Yeah, understanding is very key, and unity, because we don't want to end up with a segregated culture, or so that we move in a positive direction, and that brings about unity, love, and understanding.
One of the awesome things about all 3 of your answers, and full disclosure, we're not journalists. We're all basically friends and family talking. But what I love about it is that all of you are responding in a way that it's not about sides. It's not even really about race. It's about people, and the fracture in between people, and that we need to heal that fracture. And I think really the only way to heal that fracture is through the Lord. And Charlene, when you're talking about praying for interactions with people, that's the groundwork. Is the interactions, is those difficult conversations. Joel, you're talking about praying for families of victims, and praying for peace. That's the heart of Christ in making sure that, everyone's taken care of. And Shelley, praying for understanding, that's the empathy that people need to move forward, for hearts to change, for, stumbling blocks to be taken away. So I know I don't really need to resume all of your answers, or put them in a neat saying, but I really think that's what Christians should be praying for, is for all of us to engage, and, to add that in, to have the Holy Spirit in those interactions, so that we're not just saying what our own understanding is, what we're seeing from the media, but really that, like, God can come in and help us in those interactions. So prayer, like we said, is the baseline, but what else, if there is anything else, should Christians be doing? Because there's protests going on, there's, different donations that people could give money to, there's petitions you can sign online. From your perspective, and I know we might not all see eye to eye on this, but what do you think is the job of Christians, not just Black Christians, but Christians?
In this moment, because like I said, there's ebbs and flows depending on the day and situation. But in this moment, it's fine to sign the petitions, do the protests, do what you think is good for you and what you can do in all excellence. I know I'm not going to march. That's not my style, and that's not necessarily who I am. But I know that I can gather people around me. I know that I love debating and I love talking about ideas and thoughts. So that's where I'm going to reach out. I'm always reading books, or I'm always reviewing stories and stuff like that. So that's where I'm going to reach out. Like, I've posted lists on books, movies, podcasts that people, if you're really interested in changing or having a conversation, that's where you can go, and I can support that kind of information. I think as a Christian, in anything that we do, we follow the example of Jesus. So that's easy. We do what we do every day as a child of Christ. We walk that road, and we just be there as the light and the salt of the world, right? So that is how I proceed with things. Other than that, I try to do what is comfortable for me, and I've encouraged my kids as well to do what's comfortable for them. They wanted to protest and go marching. They're all under 18, so I said no, because I wasn't comfortable with that. And as much as I'm not, and I'm not one of those people that are scared to send my children out, because I do believe that when they walk outside, they walk under God's full authority, that they can go anywhere on this planet and they won't be touched. I believe that 1,000%. But I'm not naive either, and I know that there are people out there who will try to use the situation to make a point, and being in the wrong place in the wrong time does happen. But I have not stopped them from speaking up with their friends or those that they interact with, and ask them, you challenge them and say, what do you guys think? How would you handle this? What do you think should be done? And now it's at the point where, because they're old enough and they see firsthand what's going on, they don't need me to direct them in the conversation. The conversations are happening naturally on their own. What I'm very pleased with is also, as I mentioned before, they're biracial. So their other half of family, who never had to think about, worry about Black Lives Matter, their grandparents yesterday, when they went to see them, had to have a conversation. They're like, we're seeing what's going on and we're concerned because we don't want anything happening to you guys. And then they made it a point of saying, not the girls, because, you know, they are fairer and they could pass if they choose to, but my son. And so he was just like, I was sitting at the table and I didn't know what to make of that. And I was just like, I think that you should be quite happy because this is a town that has no Black people in it. When I go and visit, they'll remind me constantly that the last Black person that was in their town was from the 70s. And, you know, they just don't see those, they don't see us like that. So when we go there, it's quite a spectacle. Oh, those are Jean's grandchildren. And when they're all hanging out at the park, you notice that they're the Black kids in the town and where they belong. And when they were younger, it used to like annoy me, but now I love it because I'm like, yes, those are their kids. They know who they are. So if anybody says anything, I know Grandpa's across the field. He'll be the first one out there if there's anything going down. So to go back to what Christians should be doing, I think we should just be doing what feels comfortable to us. And as long as we're holding ourselves and each other accountable based on what we know to be God's word, then we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Thanks. Thank you. I don't even want to add anything to that. Joe, what do you think Christians should be doing?
Well, I honestly think, based on what I've been seeing on social media and commentary and talking to Christians in general, like, I think we need to start changing our perspective and not to be polarized in one way or another. Generally in society, whether it's politics or culturally, we've just been like, we don't see eye to eye on anything, like as a group of people, like, you know, people in general. And I've noticed that those sort of attitudes do seep into the Christian experience, more so in the States, in publicly, you know, in public life than it is so here. But I still see that sort of attitude because on one side, you have people who are more like, yeah, you know, this is right, this is wrong, and, you know, you got to live the right way. And other people who are like, you know, oh, everything's okay, you know, just lovey-dovey and stuff. I sort of think we need to be in the middle of that, like, in the sense that, like, yes, there are stands we need to take for righteousness and stuff, but we also need to be compassionate, right? And I think Christians do have an opportunity to be that bridge gap from the different sort of circles and subcultures that we're involved in, right? Like, for myself, you know, as a not so young now Black man, I do try to see the perspective, right? You know, I have that experience of being, you know, profiled by police and stuff, but I also have the experience of knowing people who are police officers. There's one person that we know, a fine officer in the Ottawa Police Department, and one of my neighbors works for Sûreté Quebec, gotta say it the right way. So, like, you know, I can empathize with people in that way because I see my neighbor, I see the time he comes home sometimes at 5 in the morning, 3 in the morning, working all these crazy hours, not being around his children. It's a very stressful job. It's a dangerous job. So I can understand it from that perspective, right? So when people start coming to me, oh, let's, like, you know, defund the police or say certain crazy stuff, I'm like, hey, wait, just chill a minute, you know, like, they're people too, right? You know, there's a system that we need to fix. Like, you know, certain people need to be removed from that system, but generally we can't just demonize people. And on the other side, like, you know, Christians who might be, you know, part of the majority, the bigger culture, when you're hearing people saying, well, you know, Black people, they're committing crimes, you know, they don't take accountability for yourselves and stuff like that, you know, I think it's time to step up and say, like, hey, you know, that's not true. You're taking a minority, like, you know, a minority within a minority, and you're projecting that attitude to everybody else. So I think we definitely, as Christians, have an opportunity not to participate in the polarization, but to bring people together. So I think that's what we should be focusing on.
That's awesome. I love the idea of Christians standing in the gap and bridging people together. And what you're talking about is really, I think in a sense what we're called to do is like we're Christians above all, above our race, above our nationality, above anything else. We're Christians, and we're called to love our neighbors as ourselves. So we should be trying to bring all together. That's beautifully said. And Shelley, what do you think Christians should be doing?
Yeah, I think Christians need to speak up. We're more on the silent side, and with all the things going on, our voice is just as important as everyone else's. I think of the story of the Good Samaritan and how the expert of the law, tried to trip up Jesus and who's my neighbor when Jesus, and when we tend to focus on the part where Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and etc. But we tend to forget about the love your neighbor as yourself. And we all know the story of the Good Samaritan, but keep in mind that there's two people who didn't stop, and so we don't want to be like those people who didn't stop and not say anything and not just focusing on I love God and stay in our little bubbles. You need to open up the dialogue and put the right message out there.
Thank you all so much, Shelley. I think you're right on the button. I've felt that compulsion myself that I need to speak up, and I think there's a lot of self-doubt in the church sometimes about where is my place in this, and what should I do in this. And I think you're right. Following biblical example will lead us to where we need to be. And I don't really think there's much we need to add on top of this. I know some people might be watching this hoping for specifics, hoping for some controversial take, but like Joe said, we don't need to polarize. We need to show empathy, we need to show understanding, we need to show love. And I think all of you basically just gave us wonderful sermons. That is a lot to digest, and I personally feel blessed for it. I feel that optimism, but I also feel a righteous burden to act, to go out and do. And whether that's interact with people online or eventually in person, whether it's to bridge that gap for people who are struggling to understand on either side, and fail to see people as human, and take my role to speak. So in that sense, I think we'll close down the discussion part, but this is where I want to bring back my partners in and see if there's anything that they were wondering about. Sammy, we'll start with you. Did you have any other questions for our guest, or something that you wanted to add?
You did put me on the spot. I was actually very interested to listen to all of your opinions. It was very great. I use the word great because it really was great to hear answers that had different points of view, but also were unified. And I will be taking a lot home from what you guys have been saying. I'll be reaching out to you guys, possibly individually, to talk more about things that you're saying. And then maybe that's something that I want to ask you a question on is, how are you guys making yourself available? Because that's something where I think I've been challenged on, is like, how am I making myself available? How am I putting myself out there to be someone that someone might reach out to ask about that question? And so I might ask you guys you don't have to give a long answer, but a quick answer on that.
I usually, when everything with George Floyd went down, the following Saturday, 9 people reached out to me wanting to talk about it. I just kindly replied it to all of them, letting them know, like, I need time to wrap my mind around it as well, and I'll get back to you guys like Sunday afternoon. They wanted to know if I watched it. I watched 3 minutes and then I couldn't watch anymore. I couldn't. But the Sunday afternoon, after talking with my sisters and my mom and my brother, and, you know, wrapping my head around it, then I was confident enough to start dialoguing with people. So I just created one of those Facebook rooms and gave everybody the link. And then people came in, and, you know, some people wanted to just get things off their chest, so I gave them the time to do that. And then others just wanted to know what they could do. And these were white people who were just like, what can we do from our end? Because I think everything that happened with George was great, but it was also a catalyst from what happened the few days before with the whole Amy Cooper situation. And when people really saw the video of how she just came at Mr. Cooper and weaponized calling the police on a black man, and then that with the whole George situation, I think those two situations combined together really gave the push that this new wave of Black Lives Matter started. So I just usually open up my Facebook around 8 or 9 o'clock, send everybody a link who wants to join, and people will just come in and they'll start talking for an hour and a half. I've been doing that pretty regularly. I think there was only 2 nights I didn't get a chance to do it. And we've had people from the States join, people from London, and it's good. I've even had a known racist that I used to work with. She reached out, and she was the one that I was very weary of, because I was like, are you really going to have a dialogue? Are we really finally going to talk? She used to be very derogative with her comments and her statements. And also because I was a boss, I was her boss, so she didn't take kindly to being told what to do or having to request vacations or anything like that of that nature to a Black person. And she made me very well aware of that. And it was one of those things where I remember calling my dad and I'm like, I got promoted, but it's supposed to be great, but I'm not feeling really great because I had somebody come up right to my face and say, I don't like you just because you're Black, and that's it. And then try to figure out how I'm going to work with this person. And then I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to love you. I'm going to love you into submission, and then we're going to see where that goes. So for me, my thing has always been talking, interacting, engaging with people. And I think I'm just going to continue with that for now. Some people have painted. I've seen so many great creative outsource come out of this whole situation with Black Lives Matter. People are doing speak outs, poetry sessions, paintings, even like graphic arts, technology based and stuff like that. Emily's writing songs as well. So everybody is looking for a way of getting how they feel out in a creative way. Which I think is also very positive. So, but in my point, for me, I'm just going to keep on being open and being available for anybody who wants to have a conversation.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I've been doing as well too. Because I guess maybe for the past maybe 6-7 years, like this wasn't a conversation I would have with anybody, whether my Black friends or my white friends. It was just something that, you know, you sort of compartmentalize and you put in the back burner. But what this whole thing showed me is that no, we can't just ignore the problem. We have to talk about it, you know, talk about it constructively and whatnot. So I started reaching out to my friends, some living in the States, some living here in Canada, you know, just to let them know I'm there to listen. I'm there to share my experiences as well. And the reaction has been very positive. Like speaking to my Black and my white friends, we've just been able to really have a conversation, have that sort of back and forth to see that, like, you know, like an educating sort of experience, learning from each other's perspective on how we feel about race, you know, social issues and things of that nature. I think having that making ourselves more available to have that conversation, not be shy to talk about it, even though could be a little bit uncomfortable at times. We got to open our mouths. We got to speak about it. We got to learn from each other, and then we've all got to grow from all these experiences.
Yeah, for me, pretty much just being available for anyone who wants to talk, but also too checking in on my friends. You know, some of them have been like really distraught, and you know, it's really impacting them. And so just like, you know, being available to talk, anything they want to say, sharing my experiencing, hearing their experiences. That's pretty much it.
Awesome. I feel compelled again to make myself a bit more available. Is actually discussions with Rich and Sammy that kind of forced me to kind of come out of my social media shell. And with the COVID situation, it's easy to kind of be, you know, kind of distant or away. And I felt compelled to post. There's actually another kind of close friend, family member of mine who called me from Ontario to say, you know, as a mixed person and you know, kind of identifies as Black, you know, your perspective matters. So like you guys, making yourself available is really important for people who, you know, are struggling or inquisitive. So that's awesome ideas. Rich or Val, do you guys have any closing comments or questions?
You know, look, first, thanks to everybody for everything you shared. I'm sure you guys understand, you know, from our perspective, it's difficult. Not only do we respect you guys, I think I've known most of you for most of your life. So there's deep friendships, there's almost familiar relationships, and of course there's our relationship as believers. But when we talk about, you know, you guys talk about heart change, you guys talked about that. Yes, the individual can change, but the church is so often talking about how, you know, one person changing can change a whole society. And I think that's what we need to be talking about right now. And the problems that they're not uniquely North American, but North America has a particular stain that other places have their own. And I don't think that can be solved without white people, right? Let's be honest. We have to be part of it. And because I can tell you guys, I've been speaking to a lot of people of color, and I've been speaking to white people. And unfortunately, some of the white people I'm speaking to, if you saw what they wrote, you would be dismayed, right? So it shows there's still a way to go. And so what we just want to commit to you guys and anybody watching is that we're here along for the ride. We don't have much of a platform, but whatever platform we have, we're trying to enable and give it to people and do what we can. But I guess if I was to ask a question is like, what do you think is the best? You guys know us, you guys know the churches we go to, you know the type of platforms we have. What do you think are the best ways that the word they use out there is allies? I'm not a huge fan of it, but people that you know who aren't Black, what are the best things we can do to help?
You go. Are you gonna go?
Ladies first.
I think the best thing. That question's been asked a few times as well, and I always say when you're in the circle, it's easy to say something when people are around you and you want to make sure that you're making a good impression. Your true character will show when you're not being watched. And when you're not being watched and those conversations are being had, what are you saying to change the dialogue? And I think that's where it needs to start. Don't be afraid of calling somebody out or holding them accountable to the words that they're using. And you know, I know we're coming from, and there's so many things going on right now. There's so much things to talk about, because even like, you know, talking to girls, girls naturally will apologize continuously for things that you don't need to say sorry for. Oh, I'm sorry if I'm not, and now it's like I'm conditioning like girls on my team. I'm conditioning my daughters. It's like, there's no reason for you to start off with, I'm sorry. You did not do anything that requires, I'm sorry. Sorry implies that you will never ever do it again. So don't start off that way. This is the situation. How do I rectify it? What do you need me to do? This is what my thoughts are. you can start off that way instead of like from a position of, I don't want to say submissiveness because that's not what I'm getting at, but I'm just saying like in the quiet spaces, in the dark spaces, in the spaces where you are one or two people and somebody makes that, that off the color cuff joke, and you're just standing there, that's the time for you to shine and make your voice known. And that'll cause a ripple effect, because when people know where your line is, they won't go and cross it, because they'll understand that you're going to hold them accountable to that. And I think that's a big thing within society, that we should be holding each other more accountable for the words that you use. Words are important. It's in the Bible. It's life and death. It's blessings and curses. So if you're going to say something, you need to own it. And if you can't own it, then you shouldn't use it. So then you need to come up with something else to say instead. And I think that's where it basically starts, from my point of view.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, speaking about it is pretty much what needs to be done. I know, like, even as a Black man, I don't tend to want to talk about that subject. And I can understand as white people, especially when you're dealing with Black people, you might feel a little awkward. Like you might feel maybe a little bit responsible for what's going on, but ultimately this is where we're all in this together, right? Don't be shy to to raise your voice, whether it's white people or Black people. It's important that our white brothers and sisters speak up about the situation. See how you feel. If there's something that we're going through that you don't really understand, just be open, honest. Look, I don't really understand. Help me understand. What's going on in your perspective. And of course, there's that aspect of calling things out. Like when I'm within my circles and there's colorful language being used about white people or police in general. I say, hey man, that's not cool. Like you can't just generalize people like that. I think it's the inverse way when you guys are within your circles and like they let loose and say, well, I don't like these people, I don't like that people. It doesn't necessarily have to be Black. There's a lot of Asian hate going around since
Exactly.
the virus, and there's always Muslim and Arab hate going around since 9/11, and it's just like we gotta just say, guys, no, it's not cool to do that. Like we gotta speak up and not be shy about it. So pretty much it.
Yeah, I agree. Communication is really key. Like for me, I had one of my colleagues, like I would go around and say something as a joke, kind of taken as a derogatory term, and she would, say, hey, that's not okay. Even though it's amongst us, it's still not okay. And it made me reflect back and think, okay, yeah, really, like, even though it's a joke and something that everyone uses all the time, it's not among the, if I make it a habit of doing it, then it's going to be okay for others to do it as well. And so sometimes things coming from a Black person, a white person will not understand. And if something coming from a white person, a Black person won't understand. So speaking amongst our own cultures as well can really promote the message.
You guys have hit basically every nail on the head. I know usually in person I'm someone that kind of likes to crack on people, and I've given you guys a lot of praise today, but you deserve it. I think your voices, your wisdom right now is very important for people to know. And my heart is full, my mind is full. I'm inspired to go out. I'm inspired to be online. And I hope everyone watching and listening is as well. And the conversation doesn't end here. This hopefully is a conversation starter. And feel free to reach out to any and all of us. You could easily reach Rich and Val and Joe and Charlene and Shelly and Sammy and myself. Feel free to ask any of us questions. And we're talking about accountability. We'll be accountable for the things that we said today. And I think they were righteous things. So, we have nothing to fear, and we're happy to share. So thank you once again, all of our guests, Charlene, Joe, and Shelly. You guys were awesome, and God bless you. And Rich and Val and Sammy, Thank you for being here. Thank you for your awesome questions at the end. And viewers, please like, please subscribe, please share. If you think this is good, then your friends and family are going to think it's good too. So let them know. So God bless you, and thank you for watching the People We Know show.